2, 1.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Guy Page, Vermont Daily Chronicle, here with our co-host, Paul Bean. Hey, Paul.
Hello.
For the second episode of the Vermont Podcast, formerly Friday at 4. Repeal of Act 250, the release of Mohsen Mahdawi, Bernie Sanders' response to that, and 2 or 3 other big stories as well. Did I say Act 250?
Yeah, I think you meant the clean heat standard.
Duh.
It's okay.
Yeah, we can wish, eh?
I agree. We can wish.
No, the vote that still has not yet happened, despite the best efforts of the Republicans in both the House and the Senate to bring that to a floor vote, the Democrats are fighting tooth and nail. And I say Democrats because this is a party thing. This is a party line thing.
Yes.
With the exception of one Democrat who, in one case anyway, has voted with the Republicans. So anyway, I told Paul, this is your show tonight. You take it, and here I start off tonight. But go ahead, Paul.
Okay, so this is Bernie Sanders. He put out a little bit of a response to Mahdawi's arrest and him being detained here in Vermont. Mm-hmm. At this point now, Mahdawi has been released.
He's released. That's right.
But I wonder, if Bernie, when he made the video, we should talk more about some of the stuff that Guy discovered this week, some federal court case information he got his hands on, accessed.
I found this so disturbing, Paul, because it was there to be seen. Some very questionable information about Mr. Mahdawi. Some couple things that are a matter of police record that did happen. And not only did his lawyers gloss that over, big surprise there, right? But the judge also just absolutely glossed it over, and the media, with one exception, went right along with it. Yeah. And it has to do with, buying weapons and possession of regulated drugs and all sorts of stuff that really just got kind of swept under the carpet. But we'll tell you that story. But go ahead, Paul.
So here's Bernie.
Walked into an immigration office 2 weeks ago for what was supposed to be the final step. Think about this, the final step in his citizenship process. He's about to become a citizen of the United States. He followed all of the rules. He followed the law. But instead of completing the process, Mohsen was illegally detained. Armed, masked individuals in plain clothes arrested him, forced him into a car, and refused to provide any information as to where they were taking him or why or what would happen to him. This took place in the state of Vermont in the United States of America. Now, not only was this action cruel and inhumane, most importantly, it was illegal, it was unconstitutional. Mr. Mahdawi is a legal resident of the United States, and like all legal residents and citizens, he must be afforded due process under the law. Unbelievably, and it is quite unbelievable. Mr. Mahdawi, up until this moment, has not even been accused, let alone convicted of any crime. And yet, tonight he remains in a jail cell. It goes without saying that if the Trump administration has any shred of justice in it, Mahdawi must be released immediately.
So that's Bernie Sanders. He posted that to his social media on Facebook and X and really all over the place. And it's interesting following that, specifically Bernie's oligarchy tour to end oligarchy. He's going around the country putting up a pretty big fight, if you will, against Donald Trump and the role that they are playing, supposedly, allegedly, and moving America and our country more towards authoritarianism. And watching the replies on X as opposed to Facebook, very different, which I think is very interesting. Something I've noticed a lot more recently is On X, you see a lot more critical stuff about Bernie. People saying, Bernie, how could you say this? You know, you're an oligarch. You fly around on a plane, and all these different things. And then on Facebook, a lot more support for Bernie Sanders. This is something I'm noticing increasingly. I don't think I'm alone in that, but I'd be curious to hear what you guys have to say about that. If you're out there listening right now, please write in the chat. You can participate in the conversation. We want you to participate in the conversation. We want to hear, what do you think of what Bernie just said there? You know, he says, Mahdawi was never accused of a crime. He's never done anything wrong. He's perfect, innocent. He's just a perfect, upstanding member of society, right? What do you think of that? Is that true? I know Guy has some thoughts on that, because Guy did discover some pretty, maybe not necessarily damning information.
Concerning.
Yeah, concerning information that most of the public media has completely decided to ignore. We're the only people talking about it. It makes no sense. Maybe it's because the info is behind a little bit of a paywall, if you will. Maybe not a paywall, but Guy, can you tell us a little about that?
Well, first, to circle back, Mohsen Mahdawi, born in the West Bank, came over here in 2014 and has a long history of being a Palestinian anti-Israel activist. Part of the Columbia University activism, which was quite militant, and the question is just how deep was his involvement? It's a good question. But he was singled out by Marco Rubio, and if you see the Vermont Daily Chronicle yesterday, we have the actual document that we got from the court records, signed by Marco Rubio, our Secretary of State, saying that in his opinion, this guy is a threat to the strategic interests of the United States and can be deported. Now, when Bernie says, has been accused of no crime, well, guess what, Bernie? When you're a green card holder, a permanent resident, you can be detained without being accused of a crime. You can be detained for immigration action and possible deportation. That's what you sign up for when you get a green card. You don't have to be accused of a quote unquote, a crime under the U.S. Criminal justice system. So,
well, I don't mean to interrupt, Guy. Sure. It just seems like this whole situation, it just goes back so much further than even within the Trump administration. I mean, it seems like the State Department has had an interest in this individual for at least 10 years. I mean, what you discovered was basically a case. Marco Rubio came out. I mean,
perhaps not so much the State Department, but
okay.
The federal government to some degree, and the local government, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah. So what it goes back to is, see, he's being portrayed by his many supporters. This guy he's a natural leader. He's someone who they like him, they want to follow him, and he has a lot of friends in the Upper Valley, the White River area, where he has a home. He has lived there since at least 2014 in Windsor, has a camp in Fairleigh, I believe also a home somewhere in White River Junction. So he is, a legitimate Vermonter in that sense, and has been very active in things. And a lot of people really like him. What they may not know, and which we publicized, and we were the first media to publicize this, which really disturbs me a lot, is that in 2015, he was the subject of a Windsor Police Department report, where a gun owner of a Windsor gun shop said that he came into his gun shop, he was taking pictures outside. This was the 2015, a year after he emigrated from the West Bank, and was taking pictures of the gun shop, went inside, was taking pictures, especially paying attention to where a lot of the guns were, and said, oh, yeah, I just want to make some pictures for your Facebook page because I just love guns so much and I think you have a neat business. So, but this guy's conclusion was, no, he's casing it. He's trying to figure out what's in here for possible future action. More tellingly, Mohsen Mahdawi then asked the guy, said, look, first of all, I'll work for you for free on your guns because I worked on guns a lot back in the West Bank. And I would like to buy a sniper rifle. And I'd like to buy a machine gun, he said to this guy, and this guy told the police. He repeated this conversation with a friend of this gun owner who was helping to work at a local machine parts or gun museum. Almost the same thing. So Mahdawi, according to the court documents, said, oh, no, that conversation never happened. Yeah, okay, maybe I was there, whatever, but that conversation never happened. And the judge, because, see, what happened, Paul, is that on Monday, the state entered 2 pieces of evidence against Mahdawi. Because up till now, really the only thing they were saying is Marco Rubio says he's a threat due to his Columbia University activity. He's a threat. Columbia University students for Justice in Palestine absolutely were carrying water for Hamas. They were essentially a propaganda arm for Hamas while the whole Gaza thing and literally the day of the October 7th invasion in Israel. So the only question is, how deep did Mahdawi's involvement go? He was a member. How deep does involvement go? No one really knows that right now. They do know that he co-founded another subsequent organization with this guy, who's the guy now down in, who was detained in Louisiana? Khalid, I think his name is. I forget his name.
I can look it up if you'd
like.
But
he was the absolute leader of the Columbia University thing. And that guy, who's been in the news a lot, and Mohsen Mahdawi co-founded another organization named DAR, which is the Arabic word for land, for residence. So clearly some involvement. The only question is how much at Columbia. Enough, I would say, for Marco Rubio to say, yep, he's on my radar screen. He's subject to deportation because of his activities there. Then the question is, what the feds decided to add a few more things. And the first thing they added was this police report from Windsor PD by a detective named Connor, where he recounted this. You can read it all in the Chronicle. I reproduced the whole thing there, right in the Chronicle, the actual PDF. I don't know if you folks are looking at it now.
I have it pulled up right here, folks, so you can see it.
It includes some allegations of extremely anti-Semitic, as in, kill the Jews type stuff, which, I didn't really add that a lot of my story because who knows, about that. But the stuff about buying a sniper rifle and a machine gun, that seemed to be, that needed to be brought out. That there was at least 2 responsible people who were alleging that he did this. So what does the judge do with this? Once the government on Monday the 28th puts it in their into the court documents, what does the judge do with it? He says, well, really, I think that's kind of overblown. FBI agent looked at it, didn't pursue it, and it doesn't rise to the level of dangerousness, I think was the exact term he used. It doesn't rise to the level of dangerousness. Well, I don't know, man. If a guy who has a history of posting photos of his family members who died in the struggle against Israel, of proudly holding assault rifles, and then the first year he's in the USA, there's a police report saying he tried to buy these extremely dangerous weapons. I don't know. Seems like that maybe should at least be taken seriously, but it wasn't. Instead, the judge said, "Well, this is McCarthyism all over again." Which you know what McCarthyism is?
Oh, of course I do.
Okay, you never.
I know my history pretty well. I know
all right.
And I actually could see some comparisons to today with that kind of sentiment right now, like comparing this anti-Semitism to communism in terms of like this groupings of people within the country. Lisa Bombardier's comments. These are the things sleeper cells are made of, and
possibly.
it's Possibly, right? And
Yeah.
not to say that that's exactly what's going on, but I mean, I've had to kind of grapple with the reality that there are groups of people in the United States that aren't exactly pro-America, and they aren't. I mean, I'm not. They aren't
Imagine what the cartels are doing right now
well, exactly.
in that line.
Yeah, it's pretty scary to think about. I mean,
Right.
and you know, living in Vermont, we are on a border state, and you know, there's all kinds of things that are associated with that. And I think, as I've said before on this show, and I'll say it again, Vermont increasingly seems to be somewhat of a target right now for a lot of things, that have to do with what the national government wants, what the federal government wants. Department of Homeland Security plays a major role in that for the state of Vermont. And I think we're really, again, we're kind of like, I think just to segue into some of the other stuff we want to talk about today, we're kind of really relearning the relationship between Vermont as a state and the federal government as the United States of America. Where does Vermont fit in within that? And I think a new conversation is being had. Guy,
So I do want to just finish up with that whole
Sure,
the
sure.
Mohsen Mahdawi stuff. Bernie Sanders says, "Oh, the long dark night of fascism, authoritarianism, no due process." Well, actually, I think this sort of shows some due process.
Sure.
A judge let him out on bail, and this guy's going to get his appearance before a Homeland Security judge in one of their administrative courts, which is legally tasked with, and apparently in reality offers a fair trial to both the defendant, Mahdawi, and also gives the government a fair trial too, where both sides get to present their case, and then he, according to the law, the due process law that governs green card people, he will be fairly dealt with. I mean, that's the process that he's headed towards. So, and I believe he can appeal that at some level if he's not happy with it.
That's due
process.
process.
So there is absolutely a due process
Sure.
here, and they're just barking really. I think about it. They're not being.
They're just unhappy with how maybe things have gone, and I understand. There's some point to be made there, but I increasingly, I think if we could say anything for all of us right now, this is all an education. We're all learning a lot about where does the buck stop? Where does the border stop? Where is the line in the sand, visually for like tangible line in the sand, whatever you want to call it. Because as you're talking about it, it's like, okay, so there's a different way things are handled for somebody whose status isn't necessarily a citizen of the United States.
Oh, and the other thing, besides the whole thing with the buying, weapons, dangerous weapons, he went out of state for a vacation or something, went out of the country, came back in Canada is crossing over into the U.S., and lo and behold, there in his car is some LSD, some mushrooms that are with drug properties in them, not the kind you put on your salad, and another illegal drug. My memory is telling me
methamphetamines. I have a comment actually from Lausanne Ludwig.
Yeah, so it just and that was all expunged from his record, and it was no big deal because it was all personal use, et cetera, et cetera. But again, here he is on a green card, and you talk about flaunting the law, and is this something he does? This is 2019. Okay, this is 6 years ago. Is this something that he does? Is he a regular user of these drugs? Well, who knows? And does that have some bearing on any of this? I'm sorry, but I think those are fair issues. If people think that we're some sort of Trump apologists for bringing that up, I'd say, well, you're wrong, and you got to look at your perspective.
Yeah, and to further that point, as I've gone down this road, Colette Page ads, and a lot of cash. So he wasn't just carrying drugs.
Oh.
There was money involved
Well,
as well.
you're coming back from vacation. Okay.
But still,
Good point there. I will not argue with Colette Page.
Oh yeah. Well, to be fair though, again, as I've gone down this path, we obviously supported Trump the last election cycle.
Yeah.
We were very upfront about that. We tell people that,
Sure.
right? So I'm somebody who works in the media and the press, we still have a responsibility to ask tough questions and try to hold them accountable. Right. But I think what I'm seeing right now, and I'm seeing this, I think just because maybe it's like a popular thing to do, or it's like maybe seen as countercultural, I don't know. But there's a lot of people who are like very pro-Trump who have suddenly, what is Trump calling them? Panicans?
Panicans.
Panicans. And you know what? It's a fair...
the tariff thing. Okay,
that was
understandable, maybe.
That was just the tariff thing, though.
Yeah.
That's not everything. And I mean, I think, look, we're barely even into his presidency. We just passed the 100-day mark.
Yeah.
When you buy into something, I'm a believer. You got to stick to the plan, stick with it, and keep trying to see where things go. I think a lot of people are with the issue of Israel and Palestine and everything that's going on there. A lot of people are jumping ship, or they're kind of like splitting within the Republican Party's base. And I guess all I'm trying to say with this is try to see what's really going on here. Is there a concern for sleeper terror cells in the United States? Should you maybe think of that before we talk about the poor Palestinians? And maybe there's some truth to that as well. But like, we're talking about our own national security within the country.
Right.
Mahdawi has been a very controversial character for a number of reasons, and I think you're right. He is definitely
it's very charismatic
and a leader. And I think, I mean, in my view of him now, watching him talk and the things he says, I mean, I want to believe what he's saying.
Right.
Yeah. So maybe give him the benefit of the doubt,
Sure.
and let's see what the judge in the end decides.
So why don't we do any more comments, then go to an ad, Paul?
Sure. I don't have any more. Actually, yes, I do. I have a comment from Timothy Page. He says, "Let me say, if any of Mahdawi's legal team is reading, if there is a legitimate story of the man's redemption from violence to peace, let Vermont Daily Chronicle interview him."
Indeed.
I personally really want that story to be true, but refusing to share that makes the claims all the more suspicious.
Right.
And with that...
And this is something that I pointed out in my story, which is this happened 10 years ago. He has since professed an association with Buddhism. People mature.
Yeah.
People grow.
Yes.
And maybe that's what happened here. Or maybe not. But needs to be looked at.
Or maybe it's a mix of many things, and he's still not really exactly sure where he stands, and this comes up to help him figure that out.
Sure, like a lot of people who've had life experiences and are in their early 30s. Yeah, maybe they're not totally sure where they're at.
Exactly. It'd be interesting to see, again, where this all goes. But today's episode is brought to you by Ranmar Corporation. Ranmar Corporation has been serving central Vermont and surrounding areas with excavation, construction, and real estate services since 1979. They are a local, family-owned company committed to the values of Vermont. Contact Ranmar Corporation for all of your contracting and real estate needs. Guy, it looks like you have something over there you want to show everybody.
Indeed, I do.
That?
Indeed.
What is
this
that?
Is what I forgot to bring last week. This is the bumper sticker. Okay? And we got our first 2 requests for bumper stickers. And the card said, 2 bumper stickers, please. Thank you. Go, VDC, go. We love you. Sue from Barrie. And we love you, too.
We do love you too, Sue from Barrie.
And these will go in the mail tomorrow. And if you want a bumper sticker, I've got one on my laptop, and I'm going to be putting it on my car. Please, $10. Send it to P.O. Box 1547, Montpelier, Vermont 05601, and we'll put it right in the mail to you. Okay? Great. Well, Paul, what's up next?
What's up next? Well, I think we should talk a little bit about the clean heat standard. Maybe we could give a little update on where things are at with that. I know there was some interesting activity in the House on Tuesday, with
really all week long.
All week long, really, with the clean heat standard.
Yeah.
So,
let me fill folks in on
sure.
this. So you may remember Paul sitting here November election night.
Yeah.
And Senate seat after Senate seat, House seat after House seat flipped from blue to red. And there were 2 big reasons: school taxes and the clean heat standard. The state's monumental, very hard to even figure out, much less implement, bureaucracy to make sure that you heat your home with electricity and not with fossil fuels. and making the people who are using fossil fuels pay for it. Not a very popular program.
No.
Never has been, except for among the oligarchs of the renewable power industry and their supporters mostly in the Senate, but also in the House. So seat after seat, and a lot of legislators are saying, I got elected to repeal the clean heat standard. And so Tuesday, Rob North, one of these freshmen from Virgins or Ferrisburg, stands up on the floor, and there's some energy bill, solar power bill on the floor, and he says, Madam Speaker, I would like to propose an amendment to this bill, add an amendment to this bill to repeal the clean heat standard. And bills have to be what's called germane. An amendment has to be germane. It has to be, you can't have a bill about animal cruelty attached to a bill about new school buses. Okay, they have to be connected, right? So arguably, both of these things are about further electrification of Vermont's homes. So really, there is kind of a connection, but the House Speaker said, oh, no, not germane. Not even going to allow it. I will not allow that amendment to happen. Okay, well, no love from the House. So over in the Senate, Scott Beck, minority leader, tries to get a repeal the clean heat standard bill amendment attached to the big state budget bill, because there's a lot of money in that state budget right now to pay for planning and implementation of the clean heat standard. So one would think germane. Well, one would be wrong, because Senate Pro Tem Phil Baruth said, no, it's not germane. And after a lot of sort of parliamentary maneuvering back and forth, Lieutenant Governor John Rogers agreed, not germane. He said, nope, we can't bring that up. And by this time it had migrated to a slightly different question, but it was still the whole, are we going to do tough climate laws or not? That was still really the question. And they did finally get a roll call on, should we consider whether it's germane or whether we can vote on the merits, even if it's not germane, on some sort of tangential point? Can we at least do that? Can we get a roll call on that? And we did get a roll call on that. And it was, I think, 14 senators voted yes, 16 voted no. And so the shutout continues, which is, we're not going to discuss this. You're not going to let us, you're not going to force us to go on the record as voting for or against a clean heat standard, a repeal of the clean heat standard. You can't make us. And which is really what a lot of Vermonters want. They want to know, where do their legislators stand on repealing the clean heat standard, which is why they voted for the people they voted for last November.
I was going to say, it's arguably, you say a lot. I mean, at this point, would it be too far to say most? I mean, people elect Phil Scott as the governor.
Oh, yeah.
People elected John Rogers as a Republican. A lot more Republicans in general were elected. I'm surprised John even, I mean, I got to say, John, what the heck? Why do that?
Yeah.
Maybe
there may be some procedural, and you could say, well, dotting the I's and crossing the T's, it was a sort of a different language, and it was all parliamentary, and et cetera, et cetera.
And to be fair, he's lieutenant governor, new lieutenant governor,
right.
So maybe there's something that he doesn't quite, whatever.
Right.
It's fine. I don't know. Not like I do, but the point is, it's like, come on, like, this is what this is all about, folks.
Right.
Most of Vermonters want this, I think.
Right.
Right? I mean, you could maybe argue that, again, based on who they vote for governor, lieutenant governor. Both of those two ran on that issue. And
what were even all of the people voting for it last year saying, I've never gotten so much mail, so much emails as on this, and it's all against it.
That's right.
So
who's in support of it? That's what I tell.
Well, the portion of Vermonters who are real climate hawks, and there are a lot. Let's be fair. There's a lot of people who are really, really, really concerned about climate. And certainly the organizations and certainly the industries that make money off state subsidies because of this, they love it. So, but is that most? No.
I don't know. I think, Guy, I keep pounding this drum. This is my drum to pound because you have the Becca Ballens and the Bernie Sanders and the Peter Welches of the world pounding the drum of everything's Donald Trump's fault. He's an authoritarian. He's destroying our state. He's an oligarch. Everything's. I've been practicing. I've been practicing a lot, because I'm gonna get my chance. I'm just kidding. But point is, they keep saying it's all Trump, it's all Elon Musk, it's all this, it's all that. And you know what? Maybe there's some if you want to argue those points, we can talk about all that stuff, right? If you have issues with the Trump administration, that's okay. However, we can't continue to ignore the reality that Vermont has turned what it's turned into, and it's become so unaffordable because of the policies that have been created and implemented over the last 30 plus years. That includes the lieutenant governor, that includes the current governor, that includes a lot of your current elected officials. I mean, some would call them the establishment elected officials of the state, right? And I just keep seeing them. I think so many of them think they're going to ride this wave of anti-Trump sentiment to the state house, to the governorship, to D.C., wherever they think they want to go. But again, Vermonters are still suffering with the issue of the clean heat standard, right? Yeah. Here we are, you have an opportunity to clean up one of these issues that was one of the most important issues, and I think there's room for a compromise. Honestly, I do. Maybe it's nothing I would like, right? But I think that there's something that, you know what I mean?
I think that's where they're headed on this. And there is some news on this, that I spoke with a very involved House member this morning, and he said that indeed there are negotiations going on right now with the House committee that has control of the repeal clean heat standard bill. And there's a pretty good chance that committee is going to vote that out to the floor for a vote.
So then they will have to vote on it out there.
Right. And the point, the way they're doing this is saying, look, either this committee votes it out, or we are going to pull every parliamentary maneuver towards the end of the session here, and you're not going to like it. You're not going to like some of the steps that we will take to make sure that there's an up and down vote on this. So we're basically saying, which poison do you want? Do you want a clean vote on repealing clean heat standard, or do you want some of this other stuff that could rain down on you?
Yeah, and I think that's what they're probably, if I were a strategist in the Republican Party, what I would be thinking is how do we get everybody on record to vote on these things?
Yeah, that's what they're trying to do.
And even if it's not a repeal, like you say, get them down the line to make them vote on a roll call if it's whether or not it's non-germane or not. Right?
And if you're for democracy, that D word, that democracy, why would one be against being on record with a roll call for the probably first or second most important bill in the public's mind? Why would one mind?
Well, with that, Guy, I think it's a great opportunity to go to an ad. Today's episode is brought to you by Procter Gas. Are you a homeowner wishing to convert your home to propane gas so you can enjoy energy efficiency and off-grid living? Alternatively, you may be a contractor seeking propane and line installation related services for your clients. Either way, our propane company is here to help. Procter Gas provides comprehensive services and a variety of products from leading brands in Rutland and beyond. And of course, I have my Procter Gas hat on today.
Yes, you do.
We're sporting our team, our great sponsors. Judy Taranovich, always like to shout her out. Hope you're having a lovely week, and hope you're going to have a lovely weekend. And I think with that, Guy, is probably a really good opportunity for us to talk about unless you want to add anything.
Not yet.
Not anything more. Yeah, I know you got that to talk about. And we'll get to that. But I do have a couple comments. Maureen Heck writes in, Hi, Maureen. Thanks for tuning in.
Yes.
Love to see that you're out there watching.
Yes.
She says, it was a mandate to repeal from the voters and the governor. And, we hear that mandate phrase, that M word thrown around.
Once.
I would say it's arguably true.
Me too.
So
that and the school stuff. Which the Democrats also are soft pedaling, are going slow on.
Yeah, and again, it just seems to be like their strategy. Like they want to just distract and obfuscate as much as possible.
Why would that be, Paul?
Because then they have to take accountability and do something about it and fix. I mean, those two issues alone. If I'm Republican strategist, I don't let them off the hook for those. And I also say, hey, look, what you're saying about the president is just completely false. The reason Vermont is unaffordable has nothing to do with the tariffs, not even close.
Mm-hmm.
It has everything to do with the way the state has been run for the last 30 years.
Sure. I think they're playing political chicken. I think they're looking at the 2026 elections.
Yes.
And they're thinking, oh, maybe we'll get our veto back, our veto override back. Maybe we'll get our supermajority back. And frankly, we're not going to do anything important, anything long-lasting, until we know the outcome of that. And I don't know that, but I'm just asking myself, why are they taking it so slow? Why are they obfuscating and soft-pedaling everything? And it seems to me that that would be one very good reason for delay. However, the reason I call it chicken is that that's risky, because then they could be going into the 26th election, the Democrats, in the 26th election, having no solution for school funding, and there's not going to be any $78 million buy down that there is this year, next year. So taxes are going to very likely really stink
You're
next
talking about
year.
the rainy day fund that they keep
Yes,
mentioning?
yes.
Yeah.
That's the reason why our property taxes aren't going to be going up much this coming year is because they're buying it all down with the rainy day fund. Well, you can only dip into that so many times.
Most people don't understand that either.
That's right.
Like, this is an emergency fund that's being
Yeah.
used.
Right.
You won't feel the pain of that until you do.
Right.
And we felt it before, and I think they're very smart for not doing it 2 years in a row, because voters are reactive, right? And the main conversation seems to be, again, people were reactive to last year to the school budgets, and then subsequently the 20% or 14% property tax increase. You know, I think people will continue to vote based on reactions, but, you know, I'm just calling on Vermonters to not be so reactive to what the rhetoric out of their statewide officials is calling for. You know, we can't just completely ignore the reality happening right around us in our own state, and has been for the last few years, just at a cost of, you know, saying it's all President Trump's fault. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just something that I keep seeing, and I'm not going to stop making that point. And I think you're right. They're playing political chicken, and they're kind of pushing the can down the road, so to say. But it becomes very apparent that this isn't about the people of Vermont as much as it is about special interests.
Yes.
And partisan politics.
And it's
at the
been
end of
that
the
way
day.
for a long time. And
Yeah.
last year was a real revolt against that. And the question is, are they going to do anything? I thought they would. I thought that this year they would say, you know what, you're right. We're going to stop being ideological. We're going to just help out people's pocketbooks.
Yeah. Well, and I've wondered, and you can speak to this guy because you were talking about, I think we talked about it last week with Calvin Cutler. It's like you mentioned, we asked you, he and I both were like, during the first Trump administration, what was it like? And you said, oh, it's the same exact playbook.
Yes,
They're doing it
same
again.
playbook.
They're doing the same exact thing with migrants. They're doing the same exact thing with how dangerous he is and everything. And
Mohsen Mahdawi is this year's kids being held in cages.
perfect example. Same kind of thing. And I'm wondering though, and I think honestly, you look at like the numbers, right? I've seen some polls, how many Americans support mass deportations and all these different kinds of things.
Yeah.
It's like the American people are still with it. They still want to see results. And I'm curious. I mean, maybe Vermont isn't quite like that, but I don't know. I don't think that the spell is. I think it's worn off quite a bit. I know a lot of people that used to think a lot differently during even Biden administration, and now they're feeling the pain of what that led to. So that's maybe enough on that subject, because we have a little bit more of an interesting topic to talk about. Speaking of, we only have one more comment. Ryan Setters, he writes, "I am concerned."
What's his name?
Ryan Setters.
Okay.
He writes,
Ryan.
"I am concerned the weather keeps changing." Maybe that has to do with heat and affordable heat and the clean heat standard. Maybe, Ryan, if you wouldn't mind writing in, giving us a little more context, we can respond to that a little better. I'm not exactly sure. Do you think I'm on the right thread there?
Or it could be on a geoengineering frame of mind. Or he could just be saying, you know what, guess what, weather changes, so folks, get over it.
Well, actually, that might be a perfect segue. Timothy Page writes, I want to know what Paul thinks about the UK scientists trying to dim the sun. So I will answer that. I think it's really interesting. I think it's, I think it's great that the UK is talking about it in the public, and scientists and organizations are admitting to it. They're talking about it as something that's happening now, as if it's new, which it's not new, which we can argue about that, talk about that. But I think to segue into the conversation of the DOJ suing the state of Vermont, as well as a handful of other states for their climate superfund bills.
Right.
That's specifically what they cited in the Vermont lawsuit.
And you broke the story last night.
I did. I broke the story last night. Love to break a story like that, guy. And I don't mean that in the sense where it's like, oh, I love... I kind of do, I guess. I don't know. I do. I love to break a story because it's exciting, or it's like, this is really interesting, and I wonder what the reaction's going to be. So last night, put that together, put it out there. And if you've seen it, folks, and I can pull up to show you some of it. This is our headline for it. And of course, there's Pam Bondi and some climate activism going on there. The Trump DOJ sues Vermont over climate superfund law. So basically what the climate superfund is, and Guy, please correct me if I'm wrong because I don't have the info right in front of me, but essentially the Vermont is seeking to sue oil companies that refine a certain amount of oil, produce a certain amount of oil. I forget the exact number, but it's over a certain amount. And they want to sue these companies and use that money for basically to make up for infrastructure that have been damaged and destroyed from catastrophic flooding and weather-related events. So to the weather keeps changing. It's so interesting because the DOJ basically smacked down this lawsuit and said, Vermont, you have no right to try to sue companies outside of not just Vermont, but the whole country. You can't sue the whole, how could you regulate the whole globe based on what you're trying to do? That is so, and it's honestly, it's so symbolic of how hubristic the state of Vermont is, and how, not in my backyard, but not only not in my backyard, but not in your backyard, and not in their backyard, and not in everyone's backyard. But the point is, the DOJ slapped down the lawsuit and said this is because the Clean Air Act supersedes what you're trying to do.
The EPA's
the
federal
EPA's
law
federal Clean Air
preempts,
Act, which has existed since the 60s. And, to the point on weather and climate modification, geoengineering, everybody keeps talking about if we're ever actually going to do anything to stop it, it needs to become federal law. And so Tennessee actually passed a law banning, it's a very similar thing, banning climate and weather modification, but the feds came in and said, no, you actually can't enforce this law because the Clean Air Act supersedes your own state law. It's a very similar comparison. It's a little...
Don't we have one like that in the Vermont legislature? Some sort of geoengineering bill?
We do have a bill. So just to talk on the geoengineering point, it's like, I think we want to see something happen. Folks want to see something happen. So putting up forward statewide bans and putting them in state legislatures is really more of a political move to drive the conversation. If anything's going to happen at the end of the day, it would be a federal decision, which, I'm just to talk a little bit about that, people maybe have seen, there's a lot of news coming out daily on geoengineering, but RFK recently was asked on Dr. Phil, of all places, about stratospheric aerosol injections and, large-scale covert weather and climate projects that are happening. And RFK actually responded and said, named some of the names. He said, we think DARPA is one of the culprits involved in these projects, which, arguably is military, And I think that's, and I don't want to make this whole point.
Defense Advanced Research Projects Administration or something.
Exactly. Defense, Advanced Research Projects. That is exactly it. Administration, or I think something like that. I could look it up.
Yeah.
But point is, that there's movement on the geoengineering conversation. Just as another quick tidbit, on the group I'm involved with, OGA, Rob Williams has been traveling all over the country and now the world, talking about geoengineering. The second largest podcaster, health and wellness podcaster in the UK, just did an episode with Rob Williams called,
Wow.
her name's Philly J. Lay. She does the Wellness Way podcast. Just dropped episode with Rob Williams. Perfect timing, if you ask me, with everything that's happening in the UK. And I'll be traveling to the UK at some point this summer to speak in front of a crowd on this subject. Same lady. She's hosting a conference, and I'll have more details on that, putting that more out there. But it's kind of a big deal because, hey, look, as far as I'm concerned, if we want to get to the bottom of this climate conversation, we can't ignore climate and weather modification. It needs to be discussed more openly. And talking about these lawsuits, right? I think it's really interesting if you look at Vermont, Vermont, New York, Michigan, and Hawaii. Mm-hmm. Those were the 4 states that were named in this DOJ lawsuit. Mm-hmm. Maybe y'all can answer this for me, and I'm still formulating how I feel about this, but there's some similarities between all those states. Namely, Vermont and Hawaii, both governors actually in 2024 of those 2 states hosted together a FEMA response. It was a forum, and this was the governor of Hawaii, governor of Vermont, Phil Scott, at the National Governors Association, where they basically talked about FEMA and the response to catastrophic weather events and these kinds of things. So I'm still kind of formulating my response on that, but I do think that there's something to be said about these 4 states. Obviously, they have climate laws that the federal government's not interested in, but the larger question is where are those climate laws coming from? Where is the conversation being driven from? Is there some top-down apparatus that's pushing this stuff? I think the answer to that question is yes.
Yes.
Maybe the answer to
I
it.
think I can tell you the clear answer to that is yes. The Superfund law came in when it became very clear that Vermont wasn't going to have enough money to pay for all of the subsidies, all the huge financial cost of imposing all of this. So therefore, we're somehow going to make big oil pay for it. In fact, that was the slogan: make big oil pay. And let me tell you, Paul, when the news of that law dropped, the national press went nuts over Vermont. Suddenly, Vermont was the golden child who could do no wrong. The New York Times, all the big media were just, brave little Vermont for doing this. So clearly there is a national emphasis, a national connection with this story. We were the first big Superfund state to pass something like this. And the one thing Rob Roper and others predicted is all this is going to spawn. The only thing it's going to get us, the only people going to make money off this are the lawyers, because the lawsuits. Well, almost immediately, the Conservation Law Foundation filed a suit because they hadn't done enough work of setting targets. Suit number 1. Then the Petroleum Institute and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce together filed a suit saying, actually, can't do this, interstate commerce, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then now the Trump administration. So there's nothing remotely like money in sight for Vermont to actually come in. But, yes, our lawyers are having to work very hard on this, our state lawyers. Wait, who pays state lawyers' salaries?
Do.
Oh, that's right, taxpayers.
We do, guy.
So we're paying for that. And our nonprofit lawyers, I'm sure, are doing quite well, too.
Well, this is a case, guy, where it just, as I get older, as I get a little older here, I know.
Okay.
Yeah, as I get
sure.
I'm getting older. Sometimes I feel it, and I just shake my head, wondering how did we end up in a state that is just so backwards like this? Because this is a perfect example of a law that does no good for anyone involved. All this is going to do, again, as we know, is cause lawsuits, cost the taxpayer money. We're not going to get anything for it. We're just going to waste everybody's time. And I don't even know, I wonder, is this what the whole point is? Just to waste our time? Are we just creating laws and doing things that don't help people just to, like, what is the purpose of this stuff?
I think the real goal here is you have national organizations who know Vermont is an easy punch. And if they can get it passed in one state, that sets the groundwork, the arguments are worked out, alliances are made. You pass it in one state knowing, it's Vermont, who cares, whatever happens from this law. But this will make it easier to pass in, Pennsylvania, in Florida, and Texas, in California. Oh, please, California.
It sets the precedent.
Right.
To start going down that path.
So it's that's a beautiful thing, Vermont first in the nation, and there's a reason why.
Yeah. I think what I'm getting at, though, is more so we're starting to realize that even what they're trying to accomplish with some of these bills, there's nothing backing it up. It's just based on, what the popular science is at the moment. And also, hey, this is at least what the federal government says. Here's just a quick quote from them. They said, this is in the lawsuit towards Vermont, it says, against Vermont, it says, the Superfund Act is preempted by the Clean Air Act, exceeds the territorial reach of Vermont's legislative power, unlawfully discriminates against interstate commerce, conflicts with federal interstate commerce power, and is preempted by federal foreign affairs powers. The lawsuit continues. The Superfund Act is a brazen attempt to grab power from the federal government and force citizens of other states and nations to foot the bill for Vermont's infrastructure wish list.
Or slush fund, I believe, is another term they used.
I think they did say that. Yeah, they were pretty.
That's about right.
They were pretty tough on it.
Yeah, and I think that, we're talking about, other states? Other states. How about the federal government? I think they're hoping that this Vermont law will be a precedent for, say, the next Democratic administration. Remember, this was passed before the 24 election.
Yep.
This was passed in hopes, please, may Kamala Harris get elected. We'll have a federal administration that's going to be amenable to this. Maybe we'll have Congress and the House too, and we'll be able to pass a national law. And that, for them, that'd be a beautiful thing.
Then it would be game over.
But they're not going to get it.
So, here's a couple comments. This is Maureen Heck. She says, this is such a joke. Vermont will lose. EPA, Lee Zeldin to publish report on debunking the green news scam science, in quotation marks. Congratulations to Nigel Farage, UK Reform.
You'll get to know him. You head over to the UK.
I will, won't I? Yeah, okay. Timothy Page writes, the Dems are not trying to solve problems, just get elected again. If they solve a problem, they can't run again on it. That's a really good point, Tim. That's something you and I were discussing earlier today before the show. And it does seem like that sometimes, like, hey, if I solve the problem, then you won't have any need for me anymore.
Right. Border, Exhibit A.
Yeah, true.
That's right. And that goes for both parties, of course.
Dan Feliciano commented, he wrote, Dan, thanks for writing in.
Yes.
Happy to hear from you.
Yes.
Glad to know that you're tuning in. He says, it's not that it's a waste of time, it's the lack of critical thinking these legislators are common. Hold on a second. It's not that it's a waste of time, it's the lack of critical thinking. These legislators are common people off the street without any actual critical thinking and problem-solving skills. That's it. Well said.
Well, and especially if they're taking their marching orders from self-interested groups. Hey, if you're a renewable power industry, who do you want to pay? You want your competitor to pay. Yeah. You want the big oil to pay. Of course. Yeah. Right? So that's really what this is about.
Timothy Page writes, they have to be aware of the impossibility of their plans. I think he meant have to be aware. So the question remains, why enact the impossible, likely to blame their opposition when it fails and spin it to garner even more support? Well said. Yeah. Very well said. And that's because, right, we're not solving any problems, right? We're not going to stop climate change, right? So that doesn't matter, right?
Thinking like a future majority leader of the Vermont House.
Yeah, that's right. Well, how about that? Guy, I do have another story I want to give folks an update on. However, we're narrowing in on the end of our show, so I want to just give everybody, let's go to our last and final ad for today. Today's show is brought to you by Perro's Gun Shop. Vermont's premier firearms destination nestled in Waterbury. Explore an unparalleled selection of firearms complemented by their exclusive indoor firearms range, the one of its only kind in Vermont. Elevate your skills with their comprehensive professional training classes tailored to every level of expertise. At Perros, they are dedicated to providing exceptional service and expertise for all of your firearms needs. And man, did Guy and I have a blast the day that we were able to go and shoot guns. But I guess Guy found a new shooting partner. I don't know. He went shooting today. I don't know what's going on over there, but he's got a paper plate bullseye.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
And check it out, folks. Yes. And if you are a paper plate and you see me coming with my .22 Marlin from 30 yards away, with a scope. Okay, 30 yards with a scope. Yeah, okay. But that is 9 out of 10 in the bullseye there, Paul.
It's pretty good.
So
it's pretty good.
So, it is what it is. It's a keeper as far as I'm concerned. And thanks to my buddy Les of Barrie, brought me out to the Williamstown gun range. And I'd never been there before. And it's on the Chelsea Road. And you're in old Vermont when the road is basically a half mile of junk cars and pickup trucks on both sides. And I'm serious here, that when I was growing up in Waterville, when we would visit there, we had a home there, and sure, that's what you see. People would, they'd want to have a car out front. If you needed a spare part, you put it in. That's right.
Yeah.
And you don't see that in, Essex Junction or Shelburne or Charlotte anymore. But when you're in sort of the remnants of old Vermont, you do. Yeah. But anyway, we had a blast. The weather was great. I shot mostly a .22 with a scope, rifle with a scope. Also shot a .22 pistol that let's just say I didn't bring in the plate because the results were not quite as impressive on that.
It's a little more challenging.
It was, yeah.
Well, Guy, my dad has a phrase for what you're talking about. He calls it Vermont lawn ornaments. That's always what he's referred to him as. You drive around Vermont, you see. Yeah. They're still all over the place. Even in Warren, places like Warren, just drive up by the DeFries farm. You'll see plenty of beautiful old Vermont lawn ornaments. They have quite the collection there.
I'm surprised the Development Review Board has let that pass.
I think they maybe, I don't know. I'm not going to speak on it anymore. But just the final story I wanted to give folks an update on. This is something that we did cover earlier this last month in April, actually mid-month. Trump says he is ending federal funding for NPR and PBS. Yeah. They say he can't. Well, if it turns out NPR doesn't really receive that much money from the federal government, however, the nonprofit that operates NPR is a federally funded nonprofit,
right,
which is what is that called? I don't want
Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Okay, yeah. And actually, believe it or not, VPR receives Vermont Public, as they've been rebranded. Yeah. Receives around 10% of their funding from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And, they have talked about if Vermont does lose, if NPR loses some funding, Vermont may suffer because of that. That's about $2 million of Vermont's public's annual budget. And, when we've written about this, when we've covered this, reading what they've said as well is, the stations that'll get hurt the most are the little ones in rural places where maybe there isn't as much as a subscribership or...
On the other hand,
sure, Guy.
A couple years ago, Vermont Public and Vermont Public TV sold some licenses that they had for, it was either tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. Some gigantic check was written to them. And really, they should have their rich uncle died, okay?
They're going to be
and left
all right.
the millions.
Yeah.
So they don't really need to be in any kind of dole anymore.
Yeah.
No offense to my friends who work there. Some wonderful professionals, great people.
Agreed.
But we don't get any government money.
And we don't
and we manage. And Frank, we have to manage.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your pay, Paul. No, it's not. So
Please
anyway,
not on the show, guy. God. Oh, man.
yeah. So anyway, and the last story I did want to bring up real quick. It's been now 2 years that Mid-Vermont Christian School has been, they were banned and ultimately permanently banned from any participation in Vermont athletics because they wanted to forfeit a game that had, it was their girls' team, and they didn't want them playing against a team with a biological male. And for that, they have been permanently banned from play in Vermont athletics. And they sued, of course. They lost in the lower court. They're now in the appeals court in New York, and the lawyer said, we'll take it all the way to the Supreme Court. There's a great interview by Riley Gaines, the Olympic swimmer, who's been sort of championing this issue of girls in sports, with Chris Goodwin, the coach, and the Alliance for Defending Freedom lawyer. And you can read it, you can watch it all on Vermont Daily Chronicle.
I just have the link pulled up there, folks. And again, that's Riley Gaines' podcast.
Yep.
I'm not sure what it's called. Do you know what it's called, Guy?
Girls Gain or something like that.
Check it out. It's there on the website, vermontdailychronicle.com. You probably know where to find it, but in case you don't, you just got to look us up, Vermont Daily Chronicle. Maybe you're viewing us on Facebook. Maybe you're viewing us on X. I don't know where you're viewing us, but leave us a comment. Say hello.
Right.
Give us a like. Reshare it. Whatever you need to do. But please, that's one very simple way you can contribute to Vermont Daily Chronicle. And if you're not already a sustaining subscriber, for just 30 cents a day, $9 a month, that's $108 a year, you can be a supporter of free speech right here in Vermont. I think we say a lot of things, Guy, that other folks aren't willing to say. You know, here we are covering the Mahdawi situation. I haven't seen any of the other large media sources talk about that specifically, but
they haven't.
How about the DOJ lawsuit? I'm not seeing. I thought that was a bigger deal than it was. I'm not seeing a whole lot of response from even some of our elected officials. Maybe they don't think anything of it. But point is, you know about it. Free speech in Vermont. That's what we're all about. I do have a couple comments I'm going to read before we finish up the show. Maureen Hex, she writes in, next federal lawsuit will be Vermont's mandate on trucking engines to EV over to interstate transportation, VT milk to out-of-state distributors.
Yeah.
She's probably right. I mean,
that whole truck thing, that is a mess. Yeah.
And those two issues are...
The car thing is a mess. The whole thing with requiring EV trucks,
yes,
which like don't really exist, and the chargers don't. And they're incredibly expensive, and it's just a mess. The technology really isn't there yet, and yet there's this requirement, going to have to do it. So they're trying to get the low-hanging fruit, the common sense low-hanging fruit is try at least to get that thing taken out. But again, our legislature does not seem interested.
No, and I think those two issues too, just all of the energy-related stuff having to do with climate change.
Yeah.
I think that Vermont is really due for a reckoning.
Yeah,
so that's why I hope this geoengineering conversation continues to explode, because we need to move out of this frame that humans are bad and that we're terrible for the environment and that we're not part of it. I'm so, there's so much I could say about that. Another comment from Lisa Bombardier, she says, they can hate us for free now. She must be referring to NPR. Yes, they can hate us for free now. Yeah.
That's a good one.
We're not paying them to hate us anymore.
Yeah.
That's hopefully how it'll shake out. And one more comment from Maureen Heck. She says, major news out of HHS May 1st, the Department of Human Health and Services published a review Thursday highlighting the lack of scientific evidence upholding gender-affirming treatment for pediatric gender dysphoria, a psychological discomfort with one's sex. I think she's referring specifically to children, pediatric gender dysphoria. That's really interesting, and that's kind of related to the Riley Gaines story. I mean, I just think we're seeing on so many different levels a full front attack of some of the really craziest ideas and ideology that is.
Paul, I was trying to think about why the intensity, the permanent ban, the Mari Corder screaming in my face.
Yeah.
And the most charitable thing I can think of, and maybe for some of these folks it's real, is they see this as these are children at risk who need to be understood, and we're the only ones who do, and that we need to stand up for these very vulnerable at-risk children. So I think there's that feeling. There's the other side that says what Maureen just said, and that the supposed solutions for this are actually ultimately very destructive when it's force-fed to children. Obviously there's some children who, this is a real thing, it would happen regardless of whether from kindergarten they were told to question their gender identity.
Or if society hadn't been maybe constantly throwing it in their face.
Right.
You know, people are
Right.
people. You know, this is a world of humans, right? People are strange, or they do different things, whatever. But I think just to close the show out, you know, I increasingly I'm seeing this guy, and maybe it's just a result of human nature. Maybe there's countless philosophers and religious figures that have existed who've been trying to answer this question. But I just keep seeing in the Vermont State House so many examples of a problem that should not exist that we created. We are pushing solutions that don't actually work. And it seems like it's like this kind of self-replicating cycle. And I'm wondering, is this just like local to Vermont? Is this human nature? Is this happening elsewhere around the world? I think there's some truth to, or an answer. You know, you could say that it's very varied wherever you go, but I just keep seeing the same theme here.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't know.
It's all driven by a flawed ideology.
That's right.
So that's what happens. Yeah.
Well, anyway, anything to close the show out?
No, except thank you, Paul. Another good show, and hope everyone has a great weekend. And thank you to all of our sponsors. And we've been getting like over 1,000, even sometimes 2,000 views on this, right?
Yeah.
Our numbers last week were pretty outstanding.
On not necessarily a dry week, but something, we're just getting consistent viewership, folks.
Right.
And we're really thankful.
Right.
And happy to see it keep going. So
You bet.
Thanks
And
for tuning in.
Thank you, Maureen Heck and Lisa Bombardier, and the several others there, and that Timothy Page guy also, for commenting. We love the comments.
Thanks again, folks. Have a lovely weekend.